Hey there, deep divers, it's Julie B, and today I'm diving into the first episode of the new MGM Plus series, The Institute. Adapted from a book by Stephen King, it's executive produced by King and From's Jack Bender, among others. And it shows. This is shaping up to be an extremely complex, intricate sci-fi mystery series. Now, just a disclaimer, I have not read the Institute book, nor have I heard any spoilers from it, so my predictions and analysis are purely based on the series. Please respect the wishes of those who didn't read the book to remain unspoiled and don't post spoilers in the comments section, and thanks in advance. The series follows a group of uniquely gifted teenagers who have been kidnapped and brought to a shadowy place called the Institute, where they're subjected to experiments to heighten their powers in telepathy and telekinesis. And also, some of them may be capable of something referred to only as PC so far, which likely stands for precognition. The protagonist among the kids who've been abducted is Luke Ellis, a gifted 14-year-old who had been planning on going to MIT early and possesses telekinetic abilities that he cannot yet control. For instance, at dinner with his parents in episode 1, Luke causes a pizza platter to levitate and fall when he talks passionately about how much he needs to learn. His heightened emotions seem to trigger the power. His conversation with his parents actually portends a major theme of this series. Luke says, quote, "There's so much I want to learn and find out. It makes me feel so small. You know, I have this dream and I'm standing on the edge of an abyss, and it's full of things I don't know. And I guess an abyss can't be full, so call it a chasm. But it's bottomless, and there's a bridge, and I want to walk across that bridge, and then all the things in the darkness will come floating up." At that point, his telekinetic powers activate, and the platter of pizza levitates, then crashes back down. His dad responds, "You know what they say about the abyss, right? You look into it, it looks right back into you." This is a reference to the famous Nietzsche quote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." This quote warns against the dangers of engaging with negativity, evil, or destructive forces. It implies that in the process of fighting these things, one could adopt their characteristics or methods. Gazing into the abyss refers to contemplating profound, often unsettling truths, suffering, or the darker aspects of human nature. The concept of the abyss staring back at oneself suggests that the act of staring into it can change the observer. The abyss, or the negativity one is engaging with, can become a part of them, influencing their thoughts, feelings, and actions. So it's safe to say that this will be a pervasive theme of the Institute series, the pull that Luke feels toward peering into darker sides of human nature as he becomes acquainted with his own psychic powers, faces down the mysterious dark forces behind the Institute, and deals with the danger that this eye-opening experience could shape him for the worse, especially as an impressionable young teenager. Soon after this dinner, Luke is abducted by a team led by a woman named Michelle, who says that they may have to get wet if his parents wake up, the first implication that the Snatch team may have killed his parents. We don't see what happens to them, but later in the episode, the woman tells the Institute's head of security, Mr. Stackhouse, that the Snatch, aka the kidnapping, had gone wrong because they had been ordered to rush it, and she seems upset about it. The Snatch team drugs and abducts Luke, and when he awakens in the morning, it appears that he's still in his bedroom, but it turns out to be almost an exact copy. It's just missing a hole in his favorite jersey. And then he discovers that what looks like sunlight coming through his curtains is actually produced by artificial lighting. He's not home at all. Running out into a hallway, Luke sees an array of propaganda posters bearing messages like, "Your gift is important. Do your part, go home. Your time to shine and stand up for the world." But I'm sure that what the Institute is actually doing to these kids is much more sinister and complicated than the way these posters make it sound, trying to lull them into a false sense of security. Luke meets a young teenager named Kalisha, who welcomes him to the Institute. But the Institute of what exactly, he wants to know. And she doesn't know. She explains that the people in charge have recruited, not kidnapped, a word they don't like, them and other kids for a top secret program in Maine, where they are all either TP, aka telepathic, or TK, aka telekinetic. Kalisha doesn't know who recruits them, if it's the military or some other entity, and she says their work is too classified for any contact with the outside world, including their parents. She says that Ms. Sigsbee runs the place and Dr. Hendricks handles the medical side of things, running tests and administering many shots. According to Kalisha, no one is both TP and TK when they arrive as far as she knows, implying that by the time they leave, they might be capable of both powers. They all start here in what's called front half, then go to back half when they graduate, which they can see from the playground but know nothing about. And what exactly is going on in the back half? There aren't many clues as of episode 1, but the opening titles contain a large potential clue. The last shot shows someone wheeling a person in a bed into a large room lined with other people in beds, each one of them with something lit up near their faces. This shot could be a clue that the kids are brought there to be placed into an induced coma state for further testing and This shot could be a clue that the kids are brought there to be placed into an induced coma state for further testing and experimentation. Perhaps the Institute holds them there until they're old enough to one day be utilized as operatives for a shadowy government agency black op, or an agency that partners with a government black op. Another clue is in the dated-looking shots of children in black and white, suggesting that the Institute has been around for a very long time. There's also this shot of a young boy being experimented on that also looks very old. Kalisha reassures Luke that it's not so bad at the Institute, though. They have video games and movies, and the playground is open late. She urges him to do what the people in charge say, which has made some fans suspicious that she's a mole, but I believe she's just trying to keep him from negative consequences. Watching them on cameras, Sigsbee and Hendricks remark on how Luke is asking questions that they've never heard from other recruits, full of insight. Luke realizes that they have another kid initiate new recruits and tell them it's not so bad because they're more likely to accept it coming from another kid. So Luke might be the smartest kid they've acquired yet. They must have already been surveilling him for a while because they have a file that predicted he would be this intelligent and analytical, noticing things that others don't. Hendricks says if Luke is this smart, they should be considering him for the PC track, which again most likely stands for precognition, a psychic power that Stephen King has explored in past work as well. Precognition is foreknowledge of an event, especially of a paranormal nature. But Sigsbee shuts down this discussion, saying the PC track is on indefinite hold, and their main priority is to keep the conveyor belt moving, which I assume means continuing to acquire more kids and move them from front half to back half. Sigsbee also says, you know how tight the keyhole's gotten, the first of multiple references to this metaphorical keyhole, mysterious statements that have yet to be explained. Near the end of the scene, Kalisha suddenly kisses Luke. Apparently, according to her, she had chicken pox, so she was quarantined for 2 weeks, keeping her in front half longer, so she's trying to buy Luke more time there. She later does it again in the same episode, and explains that this is the reason for it. When Luke says he thought back half was a good thing, one step closer to home, as they say, she says it is, supposedly. And she says this despite being an optimist who wants to believe the Institute will make good on its promises to send them home. Thus, while the kids don't know anything about back half, they all have instinctive dread about it and want to stay in front half as long as possible, even though the people in charge try to paint it in the positive light that it's one step closer to them going home. I think there's a reason for this. They have latent powers of precognition with varying degrees of intensity. In my episode 2 breakdown, I'll get into this topic further as it applies to one of the kids being moved to the back half and feeling instinctive mortal terror. At the same time, in addition to our teenage protagonist Luke, we also follow an adult protagonist, Tim, a recently unemployed police officer who takes a job as a night knocker for the police department of a small town in Maine called Denison. Essentially, he makes nightly rounds through town to make sure that the businesses are secure from burglars. Tim had lost his job as a police officer because he shot a 16-year-old kid who was armed with a weapon and about to commit a mass shooting. He had drunk alcohol while off duty, but was still in uniform before the incident happened, so he had to resign. Even though he had to shoot the teenager before that teenager could shoot anyone else, Tim carries an enormous burden of guilt with him, clearly. As my co-host Panda Kalima said during my episode 1 live, the way Tim ends up in Denison seems like fate. He had been about to fly to New York City to take a temporary job, but his plane is overbooked and delayed. He volunteers to give up his seat in return for a refund and some cash, and then he hitchhikes and happens to land in Denison by chance. It just so happens that Denison is near the woods where the Institute is stashed away, and everyone in town has conspiracy theories about what the people out there are doing. So it's only a matter of time before Tim would hear some of these stories, and his storyline will dovetail nicely with the kids who are trapped there. Indeed, it really does seem like fate brought Tim there, so that he could ease the burden of his guilt on his conscience for having to shoot that 16-year-old kid. Now he'll have the opportunity to help the kids who are trapped at the Institute, an opportunity for redemption. It's also uncanny that he found himself in Denison by chance while hitchhiking and just happened to see a billboard ad for the night knocker position, because his grandfather was a night knocker as well, and this is not a common job anymore. As Denison officer Wendy Gullickson says, this job is an analog job in a digital age, and it's a strange coincidence that Tim happens to land here and that job is available for him. Also, there happens to be a mentally ill homeless woman in town, Annie, who reminds Tim of his late mother, who was also mentally ill in a similar way. So Tim befriends her instantly, looking after her, and I think that she will be the catalyst that puts Tim on the trail to investigate the Institute. While she seems unstable and says wild things about mysterious forces hiding listening devices in people's fillings, Annie is not as crazy as she seems. I'll give you a little preview of my episode 2 breakdown here. That's not much of a spoiler for that. Tim tells Officer Gullickson that while his own mother had delusions too, there was always a kernel of truth in them. And like Tim, I believe that's the case with Annie as well. For instance, Annie urges Tim to do himself a favor and start listening to George's Gems, a broadcast that seeks to expose dark conspiracies happening all around them. She tells him, there are things going on every day in this world that you would not fucking believe. And we know that the Institute is one of those dark conspiracies, so here's our kernel of truth from Annie in this first strange interaction with Tim. And one other detail of note, Annie calls Tim Sport, which his mom used to call him, and she knows it was because his mom got the idea from Porgy and Bess. Tim asks how she knows that, and she doesn't explain, but I have a theory. I believe Annie was once a test subject in the Institute herself, but they didn't do a good enough job of wiping her memory, and their experimentation could have led to her mental illness. Perhaps she was a reject, someone they tried to work with but couldn't achieve their desired results, so they released her. At the very least, I think Annie has telepathic powers, which is how she knew about Tim's nickname from his mom and how he got it. The next day, Tim meets the owner of the Stanton Hotel where he's staying, Mr. Hollister, who makes an offensive comment about Officer Gullickson, and leaving him to talk to Annie, Tim helps her pull her wagon and she expresses distrust toward Hollister, saying he queers her reception. While the comment sounds paranoid, perhaps there really is something untrustworthy about him. We shouldn't be quick to dismiss her comments just because she looks and sounds unhinged. Getting back to the Institute, Luke is taken to meet with Ms. Sigsbee, but on the way he recognizes Michelle, one of his kidnappers, and as he takes a few steps in her direction, a creepy staff member named Tony grabs him and violently shoves him into an elevator. This is but the first of many unsettling and disturbing actions from Tony, who acts like part grade school bully, part pervert who wants to prey on the kids there. Luke meets Sigsbee, Hendricks, and Stackhouse, though Sigsbee dismisses the latter two quickly. When Sigsbee points out Luke's stoic and calm reaction to finding himself there, he says he knows that panicking and begging to go home wouldn't do any good, and he's right about that. And this is where it gets particularly interesting. Sigsbee tells Luke, quote, "Congratulations for being here. The work you are about to become a part of is without a doubt the most important work taking place anywhere on Earth. You are without question about to participate in saving the world." She continues, "Without our work, the world as we know it would cease to be. That's bigger than any of us. It's my responsibility to see that that work gets done, so it will get done." But she won't tell Luke exactly what their work even is. And I can't help but compare this to Apple TV's series Severance. The company Lumen tells its employees that their work is essentially saving the world, the most important work on Earth, but they won't tell them what their work actually means or what it accomplishes. I'm sure that the Institute is lying and their mission is not altruistic at all. I believe they just want to use the psychic abilities of these kids for their own selfish purposes, to weaponize them and profit off of them. Also, Sigsbee refuses to let Luke talk to his parents despite his offer to do whatever they want if they allow it, which is reminiscent of the plot of another Stephen King novel and film adaptation, Firestarter. In that story, a girl with pyrokinesis, the ability to start fires with her mind, is separated from her father because her kidnappers want to develop and exploit her abilities. They believe they can only continue to achieve this if they never let her see her father again. Similarly, I think the Institute likely never plans to allow these kids to talk to or see their parents again, at least the kids they can successfully train. If any of the kids fail to perform the way they demand, then they might release some of them with erased memories, as they may have done with Annie. But otherwise, I think their promises to send them home after going to the back half are false. Getting back to Sigsbee's conversation with Luke, she tells him that they aren't considered to be kids there. This is not their home, nor is it their school. She says there's no bedtime, chores, food restrictions, etc. And if they break a rule, there are adult consequences. The main rule is that they must follow every order from a staff member without question or delay, complying with all tests, including a number of injections. She claims that he won't find the tests too unpleasant, which is also a lie that we see bear out in episode 2. And she tells Luke that at the end of his service, they'll send him home to his parents, that his parents are still alive. She says they aren't monsters who would murder them. But by the end of this episode, we see that the Institute is more than capable of cold-blooded murder, and it's entirely possible that they did kill his parents. Thus, Sigsbee has already proven herself to be an untrustworthy liar, and I don't think she plans to release Luke to his parents. Finally, she promises him that his time here will pass quickly, and one morning he'll wake up at home with no memory that this ever happened, that he had, quote, the great privilege of having been asked to serve not just your country, but humanity. And I call bullshit on all of this. The part about serving humanity and the promise to send him home with no memory of this. It's possible that the Institute might have the ability to wipe people's memories and release them, but I don't believe they have any intention of doing so with successful recruits, like Luke will probably be. And as Luke points out, it'd be impossible to wipe the memory of everyone who knows these kids, so that when they're released, no one would remember they had even been missing. Again, by the end of the episode, we see proof that the Institute has no qualms about cold-blooded murder. Mr. Stackhouse suspects that Michelle's conscience is getting to her after the snatching of Luke went wrong in some way, so he sends a reporter on his payroll, Kate, to go on a date with her, pump her for information, and see if she reveals anything confidential. And, indeed, she does exactly that. Michelle says to Kate, "What if I had a story that was bigger than you could imagine?" She says it's a story that could change everything, thus hinting at the astronomical importance of what the Institute is doing with these kids. She also hints at how morally horrific their work is, wondering, what if I've spent my whole life on the wrong path? What if this is my one shot at redemption and even that's not enough? Do you think there's a hell? So clearly what they're doing to these kids is atrocious. Kidnapping and child experimentation are bad enough crimes, but I'm sure there's much more to it, and this conversation strongly suggests that. Kate then shoots Michelle in the head, calls Mr. Stackhouse and tells him he was right that she was unreliable, and she needs a cleaning crew to dispose of the body, which he sends to her location. This company has incredible resources to be able to take care of such things. Also in this episode, we see more first-hand evidence of the Institute's vile practices when Tony takes Luke to get his ear chipped. All of the kids have to get a metal device attached to their ear, like a piercing except drawing blood, without an explanation of its purpose. Tony puts on a nice guy act, but when Luke resists too much, he hits Luke in the face so hard that it leaves a bright red mark. Additionally, more evidence of the Institute's ruthlessness comes when a car drives up in need of directions. As one security guard talks to the driver, another one puts his hand on his large weapon, as if in preparation to kill the innocent family if they don't leave. The first guard claims that the forest blocks cell signals, but I suspect that the Institute does something to jam those cell signals in the vicinity so that no one out there can reach the outside world. We meet the rest of the cast of kids when Kalisha brings Luke to dinner and introduces him to Iris, George, and Nikki. George is TK Paz, an unusual case because he can perform telekinesis at will, whereas Luke can't control when he performs it, so he's TK neg. George demonstrates his ability by making water float in the air, but he says his telekinesis is still not good for much. That according to Hendricks, the most an Institute kid's ever lifted is 8 pounds. But I suspect they're capable of much more. It's just that when their abilities start to improve, they're moved to back half right away. Nicky is the resident skeptic who doesn't believe anything they're told at the Institute. He's a rebel who refuses to cooperate with the authorities there as much as possible, so he doesn't receive tokens for cooperation like the others do. He has an injured pinky and claims that he fell, but it's pretty clear that he was the victim of violence for not cooperating with orders. Nicky says that Iris is open to the truth, but George is an optimist who wants to believe everything will be all right. The kids inform Luke that in addition to the unlimited games, movies, junk food, and other privileges usually denied to kids, they're actually allowed to smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol, too. Nicky explains, that's how they get you, offer you all the grown-up shit we've been denied for so long. Luke points out that it's like Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, an apt comparison because the kids there were being exploited for profit as well, and also allowed to engage in similar activities not suitable for children. George warns Luke not to let Nicky sway him into not cooperating, to tell the truth if he sees the dots after his testing, because, quote, they know when we lie. So I suspect that they have people on staff who are telepathic, perhaps formerly test subjects themselves. And closing out the episode is a montage showing Sigsbee acting bizarrely at home and Luke joining Nicky for a game of chess. Sigsbee cooks herself chopped hot dogs with ketchup and eats them right out of a skillet, a childish meal. Then, shockingly, she heats a wire hanger on the stove and brands herself on the leg, next to other brand marks, so this isn't her first time doing this. What's bizarre, in addition, is that she's clearly enjoying it, too, exhibiting masochism that could be the result of past trauma. Meanwhile, Luke reluctantly agrees to play chess with Nicky, which turns out to be a way for Nicky to test how smart Luke is. And Luke wins in only 6 moves, demonstrating his superior intelligence to any other kid there. Nicky explains that he wanted to see if Luke is, quote, the kid I've been waiting for, smart enough to know we can't stay in this place. Or are you like the others? Can't handle the truth, so they talk themselves into a fairy tale, and we get our memories wiped, go on with our lives like none of this ever happened, unquote. He says he learned from living in foster care that nobody's coming to the rescue, so if they want out, they need to get themselves out, and asks Luke how they can make that happen. So that was my breakdown of the Institute Episode 1, an intriguing start to a deeply complex mystery and sci-fi thriller. I agree with Nicky that the promise of getting their memories wiped and being sent home is just a fairy tale, and the Institute has done nothing but lie to them all. And if the kids start working together and try to harness the full strength of their psychic abilities, they could manage to outsmart their overlords and fight back. So what do you think the Institute is really up to with these kids? And what's really going on in the back half? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And until next time, keep on deep diving and let's see what we can uncover together.